cái cây to leo lên là bảo cây to lên nhỉ.
For 40,000 years, the Aboriginals wandered the Australian continent, tracking and hunting to ensure the survival of their tribe. Adapting to their environment, they managed to find ways to exist in the burning deserts and arid plains where temperatures can soar to 45 degrees Celsius and higher, and where living conditions are among the most difficult on the planet. Totally reliant on hunting, the Aboriginals developed exceptional tracking and observational skills. They could read the very land itself. They could pick up the trails of animals and follow them over long distances.
Na kan guru kalau bandun ngatuk palang dulu, mai baca dulu. Ini audo kawali saja pan kaca warmal pane rano kuca na ya galayano. Yano ni mirang koral bagolo. Pekere kele le kala bandun pandari jagoraja.
Mitchell Gibson is one of the last Aboriginal women to have given up the traditional way of life. In 1979, she came out of the bush and settled into town life. Western scientists often call upon her skills to track down desert species threatened with extinction. Mitchell was born in the 1930s in the Tanami Desert, an immense hostile plain roughly about the size of England, totally devoid of any source of water. It was one of the last regions to be explored in the 20th century. To survive there, inhabitants had to know how to track wild game.
Though the men track kangaroos and that sort of thing, the women are the main gatherers of food and the tracker of small animals, the scorpions and the lizards and snakes, and they take their children. Their children are on the breast. They take them with them, and as soon as they're toddling and so forth, they are teaching them their mother's track, their father's track, their relatives' tracks, and so forth and so on, so that when they go, if ever they get lost out bush, they can track themselves back. Best gatherers of food, the best trackers of being able to find food, survived in times of droughts, in times of lack of water, where people had to travel great distances from one waterhole to the other. Through their culture, they had their songs about their dreaming and how the land was formed. Their songs describe the land. They know without ever being there. They have a verbal map. They are able to know where they are.
When the white man first arrived on horseback in the Tanami in the 1940s, Mitchell's terrified tribe ran off to hide in the mountains. Mitchell had no real contact with the white man until some 20 years later, when a photographer ventured into the region. Every year, dozens of both Australians and tourists get lost or break down in this immense and barren Australian outback, one of the most thinly populated areas on Earth. In this isolated and torrid desert, extreme temperatures lead to rapid dehydration. Without water, it is not possible to survive for more than 24 hours.
Kuci jalan Arab ini rakyat aja. Nanggal kuci berapa ya nur? Punya produk dari nyamper kan nyamper nyamper aja. Elwan kini berangan aja elwan ya nur. Puran jalan. Ya nur kuci na nyamper. Nyamper dan kuci piran enten. Coba lagi kuci. Coba dulu. Pan berapa kuci? Nyanyi kan nak jalan orang kalau punya nyuar nanggal.
I think you have to look at society on a whole and look at the world on a whole and say, one day, many, many years ago, everybody belonged to the clan of hunters and gatherers. Modern man in Western society has become more and more modern, and they basically learn to produce mass amounts of foods. So what that does is that basically slows the human race down and stops them from being hunters and gatherers. Whereas Aboriginal people have always kept the hunting and gathering intact and a part of life and a way of life.
While game being quite scarce, the Aboriginals survived mostly on wild fruit, vegetables, and on protein-rich acacia seeds, as well as ant honey, reptiles, and small marsupials. Hunting for food could take all day. A sand goanna might well be the only meat they'd eat for several days.
Ya nunjuk dulu ke mana
Over the years, Aboriginal trackers like Mitchellly have saved the lives of hundreds of Westerners lost in the bush. And in return, contact with the Western world has turned their lives upside down. Authorities forced the Aboriginals to abandon their nomadic way of life in favor of a settled existence. Officially, the last Aboriginals came out of the bush in 1984. Despite the relative security of their new life and plentiful food supplies, the Aboriginals continued to hunt and track, skills which captured the attention of the white man well before the dawn of the 20th century. Already towards the end of the 18th century, the colonial police of Australia had begun to notice how skilled the Aboriginals were in finding missing persons and escaped convicts. The first official track took place in 1834 in Western Australia to find a 5-year-old boy who had been lost for 9 days. It wasn't long before Aboriginal trackers found themselves employed in punitive actions against their own people. They were forced to track down Aboriginal criminals as well as those opposed to the establishment of white colonies. From the beginning of the 20th century, trackers were assigned to police stations to help white police officers.
A policeman would be sent to a bush station. His wife and kids would go with him, his children, and there'd be a couple of trackers there. And they struck up a great bond between the policemen and the trackers. It was a great mixing of two cultures. The policeman learned of the Aboriginal culture, and the Aboriginal was able to assist a white culture in the searching for lost people and the tracking of criminals, etc. Now, they didn't do it for the money because they got paid very little, but the loyalty was very, very much appreciated by those bush policemen.
So just what are these Aboriginal trackers actually capable of? To get an idea, we've asked a young woman to play the part of a criminal on the run. We've given her a 10-minute head start on her pursuers. She takes off into the bush to hide. Among her pursuers is John Daly, who has worked with the police for 10 years. With him is forensic investigator Kim Chilton, who regularly calls on John's services in criminal or missing persons investigations.
She's basically going this way here. As well. That's her track there.
That's hers?
Yeah, see her track there?
Just to make things more difficult, we've asked the young woman to change her shoes along the way.
You can see this track here on this deal. Look. When we come down that first time, there's a bit of a track there. That's a female print, that's the heel. That's the foot there. And then that footprint comes here. And she keeps coming this way and goes in there. Walks in there. Oh, there's no tracks sort of coming in this way here. But you can see somebody's sat down up on that mound there. But it looks like this person's come and sat down here. But when you look at those tracks coming up there, they don't look like boot prints. But then all of a sudden the boot print appears here.
I can't really describe what goes on in his mind, but you can certainly, he has indicated in the past, that's what he likes, quietness, be quiet, left alone, and you can see that he's actually deep in thought when looking for these tracks, because you're not just looking for tracks, he's looking for the disturbance of the ground, the grass and so forth.
Hard to tell straight up what it is, but it, you know, it looks like either they're dragging something, hiding something there, or something, you know, something's been removed from there. It looks like this bit here has sort of been laid on and things like that.
What is exceptional with Aboriginals is their exceptional eyesight. They see things that we can't see. They can see minutiae out of place. They can see a little stone overturned that we wouldn't even notice.
You can see that track going on that way there. Yeah. And basically, you see the grass there. This is all pretty fresh too, like this was in probably half an hour, probably less, eh? And you can see the freshness in the grass. Basically, the grass gives you a good indication. If it's an old piece of grass and it's knocked down, you'll know straight away. But this one is real fresh. That track's getting fresher and fresher. Basically looking at the tracks, looking at various things out in the elements there that allow you to, you know, predict how long the track's been there and give you an indication of how far this person's in front of you. Yeah, and there she is. Ah. Yeah. Tracks come through. And bang, bang, bang. There we have it. People always walk in the same tread pattern, so her style of walking will always be imprinted, and the indentation in the sand will be the same indentation all the time, whether she changes shoe or not. The only way you'll pick it up is if she goes to a meatier tread. The indentation on the dirt will be far more, you know, it'll be far more labour intensive, and you could see it with the naked eye a lot clearer.
To me, tracking is both an art and a science. It's the recognition, they understand the mechanics of a foot touching the ground. The length of the footprint will define the height of the person, the depth of the footprint will define how heavy he is, and it will also show any peculiarities. I have had an accident to my right knee that as I'm walking, my right foot casts a little bit to the right all the time, and the left foot will be going straight. There's a very definite cast to the right. It may not be very much, but to an Aboriginal, they'd pick that up straight away. They memorise it, it's just an instant imprint on their brain, and they know what they are looking for.
That a lot of the older trackers couldn't explain to the wider generation nowadays, but you know, when you look at it, the science of tracking isn't fully explained to the wider community. So, you know, slowly people are starting to break down those barriers, and, you know, people are understanding now that it's actually, you know, part of the forensics of the police department as well.
They're the forensic scientists of the bush, and they can show a forensic scientist their observation of the scene, and then let the forensic scientist take over and be able to prove it in a court of law, that they can back up what an Aboriginal saw, and an Aboriginal can back up what the forensic scientist saw.
The shape of the human foot, the position of the toes, and the way in which the foot touches the ground are unique to each individual. These criteria, together with the type of shoes worn and their state of wear and tear, all combine to make each human footprint unique. John has found several good quality prints. Forensic investigator Kim Chilton will be able to lift these prints and make a shoe impression. He can then compare the prints they've found to any prints left by suspects at the crime scene. Forensic investigators and coroners are increasingly looking to DNA analysis as a means of convicting suspects. By following trails left behind by criminals and in interpreting their slightest movements, trackers manage to uncover traces of blood and cell fragments that can be used by investigating officers as samples. Tracking is a complex and subtle art. The case that best illustrates this art is one that pitted two Aboriginal trackers against each other in a manhunt that lasted for 19 days. In August 1967, in the Hearts Range district, a tracker called Billy Ben shot dead one of his rivals with 12 bullets and grievously injured two police officers who attempted to arrest him. Billy Ben was a wanted man, and the Hearts Range was his country. Airborne searches revealed no trace of the fugitive and his party. The police sent out a mounted team in an attempt to penetrate this isolated region. With them was the famous Australian tracker Teddy Egan Jangala and white police officer Terry O'Brien. The case would leave its mark on both of them.
Oh man, yeah. I got a family. Long time. Yeah, long time, eh? You in town now? Yeah, we're in the little city behind the cup. Good one, eh? Left you on the move? Yeah, we're staying here all day. Yeah. Hey, catch early day. Billy Ben. Hey, Billy Ben, yeah. He's still alive. He's still alive? Yeah, you know. Do you see him or no? No, I've been seeing him. You don't see him, eh? You know, I've seen him. Have you seen him? Yeah. Does he talk to you? Yeah. Hey. He's a good friend of mine. Too smart for him? Yeah, that's right. That's right. He couldn't get out. He couldn't get away, could he? Yeah, because we've been tracking all the way.
The manhunt took place in a rugged area right in the centre of the country, the ideal hiding place for anyone on the run.
Billy Ben, I don't think he was such a bad guy, you know, but he was a very bloody good tracker. And so the only person they could really bring in to track Billy Ben was what we call now the super tracker, Teddy Egan.
Teddy and them knew that this fellow was an ex-tracker and he was putting his wits against them, so they were determined they were going to outwit Billy.
Billy Ben and his wife wrapped their feet in pieces of blanket to mask their footprints. Their pursuers were just about to lose their trail when they noticed the tracks of an animal.
They had an old dog in their party. The tracker started to follow the dog tracks rather than try and follow the tracks of Billy Bendy's party. How were they distinguished that it was their dog from dingoes? I don't know. They could even tell that was their dog and not a dingo.
Further on, the fugitives chose a route that took them through rocky areas where they wouldn't leave any footprints. But the slightest clue, such as a tiny stone overturned, is enough to put a tracker right back on the trail.
Derry, this way.
kanale bulik man ko jox par ngaju na mila bong ko jangol la jël bana ñango mila bongol bana wala bal ngani ñu nanu yu bali bal ngani ñu nanu bal wala bal ko jun hay yu bal ko jun kay ngana bala jana coban bala jana yu bali
We discovered some campfires with some paddy melons being cooked in them, and they were running out of water and they were starting to lose strength and those sort of things. And when they're looking at the campfire, and they'd go through the ash and they'd spit in the ash and they'd wait for the fizz, and you and I can do that, but they just walk past us. So I know 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and it's just like that.
Ted, he's more like a detective, he's like a detective. And he also has something else that is really above just the general analysing the situation, knowing the country. He sort of understands the psychology of the things he's tracking. Like if he's tracking animals, he knows enough about the animals' instincts to know which way they'll go. If he's tracking a person, and he can identify the footprint, he can identify the person's personality in a way. And so when you get to a situation where the tracks are either going to go this way or that way, he'll think, okay, that person would probably go that way because by now they're thirsty and they're looking for water, and there's more chance of water in that direction than in that direction.
We crept over the mountain. We could see Billy Ben at the bottom of the ravine with his groups just lying on the rocks, and when we tried to come down off the mountain to get them, that they seen us, we couldn't sneak down to them. And
girl, I lost Billy. I've got a couple of other women back up camp there.
we supplied Billy's wife with a meal and water and those things, and made them comfortable. And we spoke to her and reassured her that no harm was going to come to Billy from us. And we asked Billy's wife to call him because we thought that he wouldn't go far from her. Teddy Egan then said, look, Billy's coming and he's got a gun. And Teddy was a rather striking sort of a tall, proud man who had a lot of charisma about him. And he felt confident that he could go and talk to Billy Ben. And they went in behind the rock, and what happened is a shot rung out, which sort of frightened us a little bit.
I've been telling him even more boy from their gun. While he doing even more boy, I'll even tell me 15 bullets there. What you making? What you my 15 bullets? Yeah, I'll manage it. Don't worry. It is more bad from gun. Right? I've been get that Billy Ben, and I've been get that picture. I've been shoot him rock. I got him. I've been thinking out long to him. I got him. Billy Ben.
And the shot that was fired was the shot fired by Teddy, because he was just trying to signal to us that he'd disarmed the gun, but he didn't realise that it was an automatic, and he actually just reloaded it again. But he was very proud of the work that he'd done, Teddy. He liked to get results.
And we camped one night here, and we travelled to our range.
Yeah.
In Bleach Agent.
And remember that?
Yeah.
He had to show us how to get back?
Yeah, we know. we know the track.
Yeah.
But we were horsemen.
You were a good horseman, eh?
Yeah, true.
For a long time, the horse was the tracker's faithful companion, often being the only means of negotiating country that was inaccessible to motor vehicles and would take too long to cover on foot. Many of the great trackers began their careers on the vast cattle stations that cover much of the Australian outback, in particular Queensland. To this day, these properties are one of the few livelihoods available to the bush Aboriginals. They live side by side with white men and put into practice their tracking skills. During the cattle roundups, they track down the lost or truant animals. They can tell the tracks of the cattle from those of the horses. Up until the end of the 1970s, cowboys usually slept out under the open sky. When they woke up, they had to find their horses, which, despite being hobbled, would have wandered off during the night. So their day would start off with a bit of tracking. To lose your horse could mean death. If a young and inexperienced cowboy ever got lost, the station's best trackers would set out to search for him. The Aboriginal cowboys were excellent horsemen and superb trackers. They spoke English and were very valuable to the police, who would regularly hire them for their teams. Tommy George grew up on one of these cattle stations along with his inseparable friend, the late George Musgrave. As children, their boss hid them both in postal sacks so they wouldn't be taken off to town by the social services. So they grew up in the bush, where they received the traditional education of their tribe.
Tell me when the station hand we get lost, they were gone ran a circle or somewhere with a swamp.
Yeah, we tracked him. I tracked him all the way. You saw the spring? Yeah, for 2 days. I carried the whip. When I see the track, he went down, he camped, he saw the spring. He came back out. I said, hey, I see that first track when he crossed that flat. Oh, only this morning. Yeah. He went around that swamp. He coming back just I cracked the whip. He said, hey.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How good would a tracker with old granddad, George? He must have been a good tracker.
Yeah. He taught me. Yeah, he taught me to track too. Yeah.
Did he work for the police?
Yeah.
Did he found a lot of people, missing people? Eh?
Yeah, right up the Cowan.
Yeah.
You're tracking. Now, there's no one took his place yet.
The tracker who saved the most lives in all Australia passed away in 2006 at the age of 86.
I had the opportunity of seeing George in action for himself, but there were other occasions when George was absent that I used other Aboriginals for tracking, and the ones that I knew in that area, most of them could do it. But I think that George was the guru of those people in terms of tracking.
My name's George Musgrave. I used to work here at the police force in the Laura. I like to track people because you know what I like it because I don't want to let him go. I don't want to see him get lost. I don't want to see him die. I must because I was too long with the church. I must think a lot of that because I feel like to find out I don't want to see him to die. I'm happy to go looking for anybody.
Honey, help, I've got one.
Oh, great. Sarah, just wait there, okay?
The day after Sarah went missing, the police mobilized 50 local officers and volunteers. 3 helicopter reconnaissance missions were carried out, as well as a dozen searches with dogs, covering a total area of 20 square miles. In this part of the country, a labyrinth of vegetation covers both mountains and valleys for hundreds of miles all around. It is far too dense for four-wheel drive vehicles to penetrate.
Okay, thanks. I'll tell the sergeant.
What's the report?
No sign of her yet.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Sergeant, what's the results of the helicopter search today?
Sorry, sir. Foliage is too thick. We cannot see anything with the helicopter. We're going to have to resort back to ground coverage only. There is one more possibility. Okay, one last resort.
What's
We're going
that?
to call in a tracker, all right?
A tracker?
A tracker. Some of the Aboriginal folk here, they track people in the wild, and they're very good at it. It's the only last hope we have, I'm afraid.
When can they
We'll fly
arrive?
him in this afternoon. He'll be here, and hopefully very soon we'll have your daughter back.
He'd lost 10 days, the little girl. And he said, I want you to go so you can find him. And I so asked the police, how long you was over there? I said, we was here 10 days, we couldn't find the little kid. And he said, right, and we went to see you can find it. So I went from here. I left here 5 o'clock morning, and I get there, I'll get there before 9 o'clock. In my, what they call, McLeod River, Curramore Station.
All right, George, this is the last place Sarah was seen by her parents. She was apparently playing here by the water, and that was the last they saw of her. Got some photos here of her. This is what she looks like. You reckon there's much chance to find her?
When I tracking in, I stand in and I missed the track and couldn't see any more track. And I just stood up and stand and looked straight over the dry log. And I could see the little fella wave his hand. And he had a white clothes on. And he said, oh, there, the little fella. He said, hello. The little girl never frightened. He said, hello. I said, hello. He said, what do you, he said, well, why, Dad? I said, Dad, they'll take you home now. He said, all right. He didn't cry, he didn't try, and he grabbed my finger and walked over. We walked back 2.5 miles. Police there waiting ready there.
Sarah. Sarah.
When I find the life, I'll be really happy bad. If I don't find that, I'll think a lot. How I missed the track and all that. If I track it really good, as the track the man never get away from me until I find it. And I find it, I'm happy bad. If I don't find it, I'll be really won't talk to anybody. I like to see, as soon as I find it, I'll be really happy.
The moment you doubt yourself and your tracking skills, I think you're putting yourself down to a level where you can make a lot of mistakes. When you're riding on an emotional high up here, and that's what it is, it's an emotional high, and you're putting your skills to the test and basically putting your skills to the test to save somebody's life, there's no room for error or mistakes there. You can come back, and if you're not too sure about it, all it is basically come back and have a look at the whole scene again. It's 100% natural in the head here that you've got to get it right. And you can never ever doubt yourself, you know. In what old Musgrave said, he was 100% right in saying that there's no room for error and there's no room for knocking yourself.
Despite their distinguished record and following 150 years of loyal service, the Aboriginal trackers have been phased out of the Australian police services. In 1900, the state of Queensland employed 135 Aboriginal trackers. Today, it employs just one. Nowadays, collaborative efforts like the one initiated by Kim Chilton are the exception rather than the rule.
At times, you certainly do need a tracker. A tracker would certainly be able to pick up and I'd say perhaps reward you with the offender's shoe impression or foot impression. There's probably no doubt at times we've actually missed such evidence because we haven't had the tracker.
And it's a pity that in some instances, Azaria Chamberlain, Falconio, I often wonder what happened down there at those sites, whether they were isolated for the trackers first, what would have happened, rather than police searching in a grid system or tramping all over the place and so forth, and then bringing in the trackers, and of course trackers relying on minute details, and it's all gone, it's been trampled under.
In 1975, the state of Queensland, along with the rest of Australia, set up rescue teams to help people lost or in danger.
011736, that's for the green water bottle, over.
These teams are equipped with state-of-the-art technology to facilitate access to difficult areas, to gather and cross-reference information on the ground, and to locate people by aerial observation.
Rescue helicopter, it's got a thermal imaging which flies over and it actually can pick up heat from a person's body or even a vehicle or whatever it is. Very limited in rainforest area because obviously the canopy will cover over, so it won't really work there at all. If the person sort of cover themselves up as well, we have what we call space blankets, which some people carry in their backpacks. They put one of those on, you will not pick any heat up there, so very limited that way.
State-of-the-art technology obviously isn't the answer to everything, yet nothing seems to be able to curtail its invasion into our lives. 5 years from now, thanks to miniaturization techniques, it will be possible to insert tiny microchips containing a GPS and a transmitter under the surface of the skin, thus providing the exact location of any animal or human being implanted with them.
And then the only thing left to do is to run the scanner over the dog to make sure that the chip has actually been implanted and she's permanently identified for the rest of her life.
What we would find then is if everybody had that, if they didn't work or it failed, would we be able to find them? Because we would rely on technology too much. And that's where our tracking goes back to, with relying on stuff about technology, relying on your own skills to survive, relying on your own skills to find something, and even to find direction. If you break your compass or your GPS, you've got to be able to find your way out and take your team out as well. So I find it, in some instances, that'd be fantastic, but in a lot of instances, if technology fails, we're going to be in big trouble. Those people will not survive.
The imaging gear and stuff like that they use on the helicopters, you know, are first class, and, you know, I couldn't ask for anything more to help me out on a search, but I think the human value of it, a human being that's, you know, practiced all his life of tracking down animals and hunting animals and gathering animals and things like that, that value of a person out in the bush there without the electricity and without the knowledge of having batteries and things like that, that technology just can't be outdated and it will always be around.
With the help of a former soldier trained by George Musgrave, Scott has set up an experimental unit in the hope of putting into practice some of the techniques used by Aboriginal trackers when searching for missing persons. It is made up of 15 volunteers.
Away from the soil there, something's obviously moved, what's trod on there, and we actually have footprints here. Look, actually we've got quite a good set of prints here. It's come along grass, there's a bit of transference on the leaves.
I've actually worked with trackers, walking side by side, and just teaching me what they are looking for as they go through. The Aboriginal trackers, I do believe, they just have that skill within them. They can feel the land, they look at the land. A lot of them have been taught from when they were children, whereas we as adults, we've actually had to learn at a later stage. The Aboriginal trackers are far advanced to what we are. We're only learning what the Aboriginal trackers could do, but we hope that, you know, if the art keeps going with the Aboriginal trackers, they can actually teach us more and more of their skills. To just get, even if we get a tenth of their skills, we'll be far better trackers.
I see that that in the bush, in the deep culture of the Aboriginal, and nobody has been able to shake that culture as the years go by, is that there will still be people who can track very, very well. And it's a matter of identifying them. I have suggested to the Northern Territory Police Force that they establish a tracker liaison group whereby one policeman or two policemen would identify the trackers and would recognise them for their various areas, perhaps pay them some sort of a stipend, would have them on call, but more than that would be the encouragement that the police force was recognising them and giving such expert trackers a status, a dignity.
In Bamarani, Kijin in Brabit Lu and Kangani. Kinakan. What is that?
When Teddy goes, passes away, this whole country will lose a very, very valuable asset. I'm really hoping there'll be another generation of great trackers, and I certainly know that skills are being passed on every day out in the remote communities. But Teddy Eganjungla was like an extraordinary tracker. And there are other great trackers in this country, but Ted, he just has that uncanny ability to and another sense, he's on a different level. Be mystical about it if you like, but he can sense things that most other people wouldn't even understand.
It's a lifestyle for me that, you know, being a hunter and gatherer, that's always, it's allowed me to keep my health in check, but it's also allowed me to keep my culture in check, but also pass on to the next generation. There's thousands of modern day trackers out there from, you know, little 5-year-olds up to about my age group. And, you know, I'd say this in saying that, you know, one day there'll be a grandkid of mine that'll be even a better tracker than I am, and, you know, I know that'll happen. I know it'll happen because I know every kid that I've produced in my lifetime, I've given them every bit of knowledge that I've learned from my older people and passed that on.
Mangare wangola. Ngana nado. Minga jolo do gala na lubandala mananga namba be ala urban. Neno gala na brother urban or order rano gala. Gato no gala na. Mano gala na.
What will Aboriginal culture mean to future generations? Will the young Aboriginals of today know how to carry on the traditions of the last great trackers, and thus prevent the complete disappearance of a way of life, together with its invaluable ancestral wisdom?